things. But tonight we also have the opportunity to hear from one of our ministers here in the church that I'm going to say, I hope he can straighten me out when he gets up here. How's that? But don't straighten me out. Don't give me a spanking. Just kind of line me out gently. But he's getting his start here at the church. And he started ministering to our SALT, what we call SALT, which is our college and career, our student ministries, about a year and a half ago. And he has continued, and the students respect him and honor him. And I'm thankful tonight that we get to hear from Brother Ted Maldonado. What an honor, amen? So I want to give God glory as he comes. Brother Ted, come and speak to us for a moment.
Awesome. Most of that I think was true. We'll see here in a minute. All right, let's get the notes out. Well, first I want to thank Pastor. Graduation for me has been sort of a big deal. I'm going into my third college graduation, so at this point they're also a little here or there. But I mean, it's a huge life event, right? There's a lot of work that went into getting to this point, to walking across the stage, getting a piece of paper that's probably worth $2 and you spent thousands of dollars, trying to get it. So I want to thank, Pastor for the opportunity for us to be able to celebrate these accomplishments. They're important. And with that, I would also like you to pray over the service. I'm crazy nervous right now. I don't know.
Thank you, Lord God, for this day. I pray that you would have your way in this service. Touch Brother Ted, Lord God, touch his life. Anoint him with you. Lord God, help us to hear with our ears, but also with our hearts. We give you glory for everything. In Jesus' name, amen.
Awesome. So, I guess the theme's probably going to be reiterated repeatedly as we go through today. But what I want to kind of talk about is graduation, that transition, and kind of, I guess, maybe the lessons that I've learned as I've gone from school to school. There's I think some simple truths, some simple ideologies, concepts that I think if we internalize, really understand, these transitions, graduation, it becomes a little bit less scary. We're not so nervous about what's to come. We can kind of navigate that unknown a little bit easier. So I was trying to think sort of a title and kind of use my background, my research background, to formulate a hypothesis, study it out, get some results. So today it's not going to be so much a Bible study, more as so maybe a TED Talk. Victory's first ever and probably last TED Talk. And I try to find a real catchy title. So my title is On the Metamorphosis of Collegium Studiosum to Collegium Graduati, a meta-analytic critique of 11 years of post-secondary education. I don't know if you understand the title. I don't. I Googled most of the words. The alternative title, which we're going to keep that one up because I worked way harder on that than I should have, is Thoughts from a Guy Who Graduated a Lot. So every May in America, many celebrate their educational achievements by walking across a stage to receive their degree. Right? You sit, you listen to someone that you don't really know give this really eloquent speech about how you've worked really hard and now the future is yours. It's just there if you're willing to take it. I had to sit through those. I don't remember who really spoke. I don't remember really what the message was about. Really, all I was focused on was the steak dinner I was promised for graduating. So it was pretty much beyond really what I was really interested at the time. But I do remember kind of having mixed emotions, right? I was pretty excited, but I was also relatively terrified. College is pretty uniform. You kind of have your day-to-day pretty much mapped out. But the next step really isn't that way. It's up to you to survive, right? You're the one earning the paycheck. You're the one having to make the decisions, and your decisions ultimately affect you. It's not someone else really kind of scooting into that space and kind of messing up the flow of your life. It's up to you, and that can be terrifying. Not having that map, not having guidance potentially. So with time, and I think across 11 years of college. I think I have some perspectives. I'm sure these will change. I'm sure there's some people who are more senior than I am that could definitely correct a lot of what I'm saying. But I think there's some key points, some key ideas that if we really grasp, if we kind of understand, not only for a college graduation, but any transition or any change in life, I think, it makes it a little bit easier, a little bit more manageable. So first, and again, I don't think any of these are going to be super profound. I'm sure a lot of you probably could preach this message without any of my notes and probably hit every single bullet point that I talked about. But I think if we have that sort of in our quiver, in our toolbox, we're in a position to be pretty successful. So the first is to remember to keep God first. It's easy to think that a degree makes us smart. A degree really should let us know how little we know about life. It should really make us aware that most of what we know and what we'll experience in life, we probably don't have an educational blueprint for. A lot of this we're gonna have to rely on something. And if we're going to, might as well rely on God, right? Remember to keep God first. We're not God, so we should not think that we have all the right answers. One of the biggest things that I've learned is being able to say, I don't know. I don't know if you guys, I don't know, yeah. I don't know if you guys have ever spoken to someone and they seem to have an answer for everything, and you can ask them a million questions, you can know the right answer, and they'll still start rattling off some nonsense that isn't true. And I think to a certain point, you kind of lose some respect or some motivation to seek guidance from that individual. So being able to say, I don't know, trust on God, rely on God, that's broadly, it's a super important concept and something that I still have to work on, because I think that I can sit down and out-logic any situation that's put in front of me. But most of the time, the real solution, the real plan is to sit down, pray, listen to what God has to say, and then see what direction that he provides. It's not really up to me and of course, God gave me a brain, God lets me use it, but why do I have it, right? It's not ultimately just to sit there and think and to try to pretend like I can solve all the world's problems. It's for me to trust and obey, even though I know that I can also have my own thoughts and my own opinions. Proverbs 3, verse 5 and 6 says, trust in the Lord with all thine heart, and lean not unto thine own understanding. In thy ways acknowledge him, and he shall direct thy paths. In studying Bible studies, I guess, everyone seems to have like a point and a story, so this is the point where I have a story. My dad was in the military for 22 years. While he was in the military, he was trying to get, he got also several degrees, but he stopped at his master's degree. And we make fun of him because it took 22 years for him to get that, but being in the military, I think there's other priorities that the U.S. government has for him than getting an education, at least at that time. So when we were younger, I remember my dad having to study quite a bit for this and working quite a bit to make sure that he has all the assignments, his readings, whatever. I know that I'm probably one of the reasons why he probably missed a few assignments. But typically, Wednesday nights, my dad wouldn't go to church. He would basically use that about 4-hour period that he would have free of kids and any other distraction to study. And at that point, we were just getting into an apostolic church. We didn't really go to church before that, except for like Christmas and Easter. And my mom was trying to make it a point and make an example that we'll go to church and you'll like it whether you do or not. So we went. And my mom would always pester my dad. It's like, you should go. We're learning a lot. We're growing a lot. I would like you to be kind of part of that growth. But my dad would always say, no, this is my 4 hours to study. This is my 4 hours to get things done. So, my mom was like, fine, but we're still going. So one night we left, we went to church, I'm assuming we had a good time, came back, and my dad was just furious. He was mad. Everybody was, bothering him. He was just not having a good time. And when we kind of got to the core of it, I guess what happened was the moment we left the driveway to the moment that we got back, the power had gone out. So my dad was not able to use the computer at all. He wasn't able to get any of his work done. And this isn't the point where you can kind of like go to the library. Like, I think our computer had like Windows 98 on it. So this was like initial computers. And so my mom kind of had that smirk on her face, that like, I told you so smirk. Like, you should have came to church. You probably would have gotten more out of your evening than whatever temper tantrum you're throwing right now. So But from that moment forward and from that story, it was kind of, if you put God first, if you go to church, I know that's a 4-hour time commitment, and that's huge. Right now I'm writing a dissertation, and I would love to have this 4 hours to, knock out a couple of pages on that. But remembering to put God first is crucial. You start to realize that it's not really the plans that you've laid out, but the plan that God has for you that's really going to get you to where you want to go. And sometimes you don't even know where you need to go, but if you put God first, He'll get you where you need to be. So remember to keep God first. Second, realize that there will always be battles to fight, but with God's strength, we can overcome. If you've read the Bible, I think you're well aware that most of the Bible is kind of, we're geared to fight. We're prepared to conquer enemies, to come into some sort of conflict and overcome it. God gives us an armor of God. I don't think He's going to give us armor if He doesn't expect us to fight or have some sort of contention that we need to deal with. When we graduate, when you're supposed to be on your own, there are going to be hurdles that you're going to fight. It's not an if type of thing, it's a when type of thing. Paul exhorted in Timothy, or in 1 Timothy 6 and 12, fight the good fight of faith. Our enemies are the world, the flesh, and the devil. And one of the biggest things, that I think I've had to overcome, and I think one of the big things that probably even Texas A&M kind of gives is that those worldly distractions. I would love to be able to spend all Saturday at a football game, but what does that have to, how is that going to help my prayer life? I would love to be able to, get all my assignments right, but what does that have to do with my Bible reading, right? There's a lot of things that are going to distract us. There are a lot of things that are going to try to draw us off course, but it's up to us to kind of realize and stay focused, and fight that fight to make sure that we're pushing out anything that is to distract us. I will shout out to one of our graduates who led a Bible study. So Vernicia led a Bible study a couple weeks ago and brought our attention to Micah 7 and 8. I have heard this verse before, but I've never really internalized it the way that Vernicia had brought it up. So Micah 7 and 8 says, "Do not gloat over me, mine enemy. Though I have fallen, I will rise. Though I sit in darkness, the Lord will be my light." And I think, and one of the interesting things that she brought out is the word "though." So going back to that if-when idea, though I fall, I shall arise. So we're expecting to fall. We're expecting the battle, and there's going to be times where we're going to feel like we're slipping something. We're not winning. We're not pushing forward the way that we're supposed to. But I will rise. And why are we going to rise? Right? Because we have God. We have God at the center of our lives. We have God kind of encapsulating everything that we do and the identity that we have under Jesus. So. To recap, so remember to keep God first, realize that there will be battles to fight. The third, and probably most obvious, is stand still and wait on God's timing. And this, for me, is probably the most difficult thing. If it wasn't done yesterday, it's taking too long. I have little patience, and I'm working on it, I promise. But today, many of us want things to happen now, and that's not always God's plan. And I know after graduation, I wanted that 10, 15 year down the road paycheck. I wanted the 10, 15 year down the road job title. I wanted all of the big stuff, but there's some patience that we have to have. But before we can get that. So standing still, being patient, it's a key component, and there's a lot, I think, that we have to consider with being patient. For me, I always thought it was like sitting and waiting. When you pray, a lot of times, at least it used to be, that my prayers were very one-sided. I would pray, and then out the door I went. I didn't listen. And at that point, it's not a prayer, and it's not a conversation with Jesus. It's more of me making demands and hoping, and praying that God answers them. But that's not how God works. He wants to talk. And, at a certain point, you do have to listen. How successful would you be as a student if you went to a lecture, you talked the whole time, or you were on the phone the whole time, and then you missed a due date? for an assignment, or you didn't turn in a specific project. If you're not focused, if you're not listening for the response, what's the point of praying? At this point, you're just talking to the wall and hoping for something good to happen, right? You need to make sure that you're listening and heeding, but also heeding God's word. The other part of the listening is the doing, right? How many times have you prayed and the answer that you got wasn't the answer that you wanted, right? And how many times have you had to basically delay something that was meant for you because you were grappling with your flesh on, will I make that jump? Or do I need to move, or should I move forward the way that, that God wants me forward? Because what makes sense is if I do this. But it doesn't matter what makes sense to us. It's what makes sense to God, because God's ultimately putting you into the path that you ultimately should be following. So understanding God's true wisdom and learning to trust him no matter what is the greatest lesson that I think any graduate student can learn, or graduate can learn in this season and in this time of life. Do not leave God out of your conversations. Welcome him into your discussions. That way that you can receive the full blessings that he has for you. So the first 3 points that I brought up, I think, were pretty straightforward, right? Most people, I think, probably would have come up with these. If I gave you a few moments to think about this topic, these are probably things you would have came up with. So the next two topics are the two, that I think that I learned the most about, particularly coming to Texas. Texas was the biggest move, I think, for me, just with school, and I also think, like, I initially had a seat at a school in Colorado, so I was pretty excited about going to Colorado. So coming to Texas, where it doesn't snow, is sort of a big shift for me. But the big lesson that I think I learned is that God means for you to be where you are. I think a lot of us get a little antsy when we're in a position that we're not super comfortable with, or we're not familiar with, or we didn't think personally we were going to end up here. We'll get real antsy or overwhelmed or unsure of our direction. But if we trust that God has you exactly where you are for a reason, that becomes a little bit null and void, right? So you should keep your eyes on God and remember that worry and fear have no place in your heart. Jeremiah 29:11 says, For I know the thoughts that I think toward you, saith the Lord, thoughts of peace and not of evil, to give you an expected end. So to give you an expected end, right? Just because you don't know why you're in a certain place or certain position or season in your life doesn't mean that God doesn't. And a lot of times we like to focus and bicker, and I'm sure somebody in this room has heard me complain once or twice about the heat in Texas or some topographical lacking Texas might have, but I could have spent the last 5 years complaining about, it's too hot here, there's no mountains, there's nothing for me to do. But what does that have to do with my purpose in Texas? Why am I here, right? Who am I supposed to reach? Who am I supposed to be talking to? What effect am I supposed to be having on my campus, in my church, in my community, right? If I'm too worried about why I'm here, I'm not really focused on the purpose that I have in that environment. And I think a lot of times we can waste, weeks, months, years being so focused on things that don't really matter. You're already here. You might as well use your time effectively. There's no point in trying to distract yourself from God's purpose because you're not enjoying some aspect of your environment. So for me, it was a hard Sunday because I was praying. I was like, why am I here? Why did you send me to Texas? I feel like I could have been just as effective in Colorado, right, or wherever else I could have gone. But at that moment, it was like it doesn't matter where you are. The point is you're supposed to learn and grow and develop some sort of skill set so that if you do leave this place, you have that skill set that you can use, because there might be other people who don't have that. So I was sitting over here kind of thinking and trying to listen. I wasn't liking what I was hearing, obviously. But at that point, that's when God said, hey, focus on what you can do here. It doesn't matter. You're already here. You're going to be here for a set amount of time. Move past that. Stop letting little trivial things hold you back from the things that I want to be able to do for you and through you. And I think a lot of times we can get stuck on that, especially our first job out of college, or if it's a school in a location you don't want. A lot of times we kind of focus on how much we dislike a place, and we're so focused on maybe going somewhere else that we miss the opportunities that are right in front of us. That person that you meet at the grocery store, the person that you meet at the bank or on a school campus. God means for you to be where you are. So sometimes it's important to just take a step back and focus on that. So the last point I guess I want to make, I'd be remiss if I didn't put in some sort of psychological principle into this Bible study, is it's all about perception when you, I think the previous point gets to that a little bit, but it's all about perception. When you're in a transition, a lot of things changing, right? A lot of responsibilities shift onto your shoulders, a lot of maybe visuals, so the location that you're in, the people that you're around, a lot of things change. And often we focus on that change, and we let a lot of that movement be distracting to the things that truly matter. So Stanley Arnold wrote, "The essence of human life is change, but far too many of us the essence of human life is change, but for too many of us, change does not excite, it disturbs. If success is what we seek, we must make change a partner in our pursuit." And I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing to get a little, worked up when there's a little bit of change. But if it's getting to the point where it's distracting you from your purpose, if it's moving you away from what it is that you're expected to do in the kingdom of God, that's when it's starting to become detrimental. A lot of people, when they look at clinical disorders, they see like, oh, I don't sleep well. Oh, I don't do this. I don't do that. But the reason it's a clinical disorder is because it negatively affects your life, right? If change is negatively affecting your life, there's something that we need to work on and reevaluate. But the critical component, the thing or the psychology behind this that I want to get us to understand is, don't look at the things that are changing, but look at the things in your environment that are constant. That's the stuff that's going to be those pillars that you can focus on, hold on to when you're sort of stressed out because things are changing, and that you can rely on in tough times. And what are those things that are staying constant? God. Yeah. God is, He's still, God's love. God's presence around us is not going to change. The same God that I served here in College Station is the same God that I served in Bozeman, the same God that I served in North Manchester, in Tacoma, Washington, in Brunswick, Maine. He's not changing. He's not wavering. Even though my environment changed, even though the people around me changed, God didn't. And if I can kind of cleave to that, that's what's going to help us focus through those transitions and make it not so terrible. That's going to allow us to open our eyes even potentially and kind of see where it is that we're supposed to go, as opposed to, falling down flat and letting that transition consume us. So, to recap, remember to keep God first. Remember that there's always going to be a fight. Remember to stand still, to listen, but also follow God's guidance. God means for you to be where you are and look at what is not changing. So with this in mind, I have two challenges that I want to give to the graduates and really anyone who's in a transition or would like to accept the challenge. I think they kind of go hand in hand, but I will talk about them a touch separately, I guess. First is to live life with passion. I know that sounds very hallmarky and like I'm giving the commencement speech, but I think I have a good point with it. But this is also followed up with live life with humility. So live life with passion. John 10:10 says, "The thief come not but for to steal and to kill and to destroy. I am to come that they may have life, and they may have life more abundantly." I don't think God necessarily wants us to have a stagnant life. I don't think God necessarily wants us, to be miserable all the time. I think God wants us to have joy. If we read Ecclesiastes chapter 3, verses 1 through 8, there's a lot of seasons. There's a lot of things that we're expected to experience. The Bible says so. And part of that is joy. And to have happiness, and I understand that we're only passing through this world. I understand that we're not supposed to be here permanently and that there's a season for everything, but I do think that we're supposed to have some fun. You just spent the last 4 years probably pushing away some of the more fun aspects of your 18 to 22-year-old part of life. Now we have sort of that opportunity to explore and to be happy and to gain some sort of joy with life. We have the time. We're no longer fixed to having to read a certain textbook by a certain day to have a test. We now have the financial freedom, hopefully, through maybe even a paycheck at all, to go out and travel and to go experience things, or maybe to go buy a dinner that you wouldn't have been able to in undergrad. So as you move on to this next phase, don't forget to enjoy it, right? You're only going to be in your 20s for a certain amount of time. But if you embrace life and know that it's evolving, don't forget about your passion for the Lord. I hope that when you graduate that maybe you travel, you read more books, you pick up a hobby, but please don't let that distract you from what it is that you're supposed to do for the Lord. Just because you don't have to read a textbook doesn't mean that you have to also then replace your Bible reading. Just because you can travel doesn't mean that you don't go to church. Just because you're able to do something else doesn't mean that the things of God then take a second seat. We have a lot of structure here, and typically on Sundays, it's pretty natural just to come to church. But when we have more freedoms, we get in trouble because now we can explore without boundaries. And when we don't have boundaries, typically we get distracted because there's things that are going to come in and steal our concentration away from the things that matter. And that's not of God. So let's be mindful of those things. But as you live life with passion, also live life with humility. Your degree does not mean that you know everything. This has hit me insanely hard a couple of times where I thought I was the smartest man in the room, and clearly I wasn't. I still don't think I am. There are a lot of people in this room that know a lot more about a lot of things than I ever will, or to a certain extent care to know. But I think, there's been a couple of times where I've been immediately humbled. I or Hillary have talked to people, and they ask, what am I doing here? I think there's still people who don't necessarily know that I'm here for school, and I get remarks that, oh, I didn't know he was smart. Oh, I didn't know he was going to, it's like I'm only human and I'm right here, but it's all good. I can take it. I appreciate it. Every once in a while, being humbled probably isn't the worst thing. I have an ego that needs to be tempered every once in a while. Just ask Jimmy when I come over for game nights. I get a little rowdy every once in a while. But yeah, live humbly. So in Philippians chapter 2, Paul writes that even though Jesus is God, he made himself nothing, taking the very nature of a servant. If this kind of humility was good for Jesus, it should be good for me. We should have a servant's heart. It doesn't matter what your position is, your title, your paycheck, whatever status you think it is that you have. Having a servant's heart is probably going to be by far and away the best thing that you can ever put into anybody's life or into your life, to your life in general. So I challenge you to put others' interests before your own, to be a servant, to do for others what no one else will, to take up for the weak and the outcast. In a world whose mantra is me first, you can never underestimate the impact that your humility can make on the world around you. It is not without reason that Jesus said the first will be last and the last will be first. So your degree does not put you above others. No one likes to know it all. I know that from firsthand experience. I'm that kid. I was like, well, actually, and then most of the time I'm wrong anyway, so it doesn't much matter what I actually think. And here's sort of a key. Here's something that I think I've learned, and I'd love to be corrected. Here's the humility, I guess, coming. Learn to listen more than you talk. I think a lot of times we get wrapped up in what we know, and we feel like we have to word vomit every piece of information that we've ever accumulated throughout our life to help some sort of situation. Sometimes most people just want somebody to talk to so that they can work out their own issues, and you're just there to listen. And for me, that's hard because, ask Hyphen and I like to talk every time I say I have a 15-minute Bible study. We're there past 8, and, I get those stares, and everyone's getting nervous and want to go. So, I know that I can talk a lot, but it's one of those things where I think if we just, learn to listen, humility becomes a little bit better because it's no longer us thinking that we're going to do something significant to influence somebody else. It's us realizing that our job is to listen and be absorbing to others and let others have the opportunity to express themselves, and then at that point we're able to help. When we have that other person mindset first, if we focus on the other person first before we focus on ourselves, we start to build sort of this humbleness about us, and then we, I think personally we become a little bit more effective in God's kingdom, because nobody wants the guy that's boastful. People typically want the guy that's a little bit more meek, the one that's sitting back, who knows what they're doing, but also is a little bit more willing to observe than they are to influence. So Proverbs 11:2 says, when pride cometh, then cometh shame, but with the lowly is wisdom. Proverbs 29:23 says, a man's pride shall bring him low, but honor shall uphold the humble spirit. 1 Peter 5:5 says, likewise, you who are younger, be subject to elders. Clothe yourselves, all of you, with humility toward one another. For God opposes the proud, but gives grace to the humble. I do not want to be opposed by God. I do not want my pride or my boastfulness to be the reason why God does not bless me or open up opportunities. I know my mouth can get me in trouble in a number of different ways. Don't let it be because I'm braggadocious or I'm too, my head's too big to fit through the back door. So I think another tidbit, this isn't really in my notes, but reading this kind of brought it up. Be subject to elders. One of my favorite quotes is, failure is the best education, but you don't have to learn from your failure. A lot of times the reason why, if you don't know, a lot of my research is in older adults, so I like to understand issues within advanced age. And I think the main reason I like it is because most of the time you learn some sort of nugget or life lesson if you listen long enough to an older adult, and they give it out freely. It's not like you have to pry it out of them. But a lot of times, I'm too young to think, I don't need that. But if you listen long enough, you kind of realize, man, that's actually pretty helpful. That can be useful. And I don't want you guys offending people, so don't just say, hey, elder, give me advice. That would be rude. But, listen to your elders. Listen to the people that you think, have something worthwhile to say. Not everything that comes out of somebody's mouth is useful. That's a whole nother Bible study. But having somebody that you can listen to and you can learn from their failures, because, at that point, your starting point is a little bit farther than where they were. You don't have to redo or rehab the mistakes that other people have made. You can move forward. But that has nothing really to do with humility at that point. So, all right. So I am closing, but so for me, just remember to keep God first, fight the good fight, be still and know why you are where you are, and focus on what is not changing. But also remember to live with purpose, but also stay humble. This balance, I find, helps you overcome any transition, especially graduation. I think an important, potentially Bible verse that could sum this all up, Matthew 5:17 says, let your light shine before all men that they may see your good deeds and praise the Father in heaven. I think if you kind of take these principles, these concepts to heart, wherever you go, regardless of whether you stay here in Texas or you're going to the great white north, you can be a light. You can be that light for others. This is a dark world. I don't know if anyone has the news on their phone or at home or whatever, but every day something miserable is happening. I get some sort of update. So being some sort of flicker of light, some sort of positive aspect to somebody's environment, somebody's horizon, somebody's landscape, can be the world of difference. And I think being that light and being that role model is important. And right now in this transition, you have that opportunity to maintain that ideology and that mindset and bring that to you wherever you go, whether it's another department at another university or at a corporate office. I think we have an awesome opportunity to be a light and to show God or show others who God is through us. So, I'm really bad at transitions, but we are going to transition. So again, the theme was about graduates, and at this time I do want to start to honor some of our graduates. The first graduate we will honor is James Guy Garrish. All right, so he's graduating with a Bachelor of Science in Geography from Sam Houston State University. After graduating, yeah, it's time to go. All right, so after graduation, he's moving north and plans to pursue a master's degree. He's not 100% sure where yet, but it will be north. His favorite college memory is going to various geology field trips. I'm very curious what you do on a geology field trip. I have my stereotypes, but I will leave them to myself. And his least favorite memory is the all-nighters needed to write papers. If you're going to a master's program, I regret to inform you these will continue, and they will probably be more frequent, but put God first, it will be fine. During his time in school, he also volunteered, served, and participated in the following ways at Victory Church. So he was a member of the praise team, singing like an angel. He helped on church work days, volunteered his muscle and his truck by helping people move. I know that I have put several dents in his truck by helping people move, so sorry about that. He has bent it like Beckham on the Victory Church soccer team, and he hit golf balls that would make even Tiger Woods jealous in the Victory Church Rangefinders small group. James Guy is one of a kind, and we're so thankful for him. Congratulations on earning your degree, James Guy. We are excited for your future. Definitely keep in touch, but I'll force you to keep in touch, so there's no worry there. All right, so next we're going to celebrate Vernisha Hazel. All right, so she is graduating with a Bachelor of Science in Technology Management with a double minor in Business and Cybersecurity from Texas A&M, so clearly she did nothing during her 4 years here. Only kidding. So after graduation, she is going to work as a software developer at Bell Flight in Fort Worth. That's only 3 hours away, so we expect you here every Sunday. Pretty easy commute. Her favorite college memories are football game days. Her least favorite memories are getting sick every finals week and being sent home at the beginning of COVID. That does sound rough, yes, sir. All right, so during her time in school, she also volunteered, led, and served in the following ways. Vernisha, especially this last year, was pretty vital in SALT, particularly in the CMI chapter that we have at Texas A&M. She was a faithful member of SALT at TAMU all 4 years. She was the secretary her junior year and the president her senior year. She also attended the CMI Awakenings, which are the national conferences that the UPCI puts out for training, but also encouragement and revitalization so that we can continue to carry the burden for our campus. She did that both in person and virtually. Excuse me. And she has also taught many Bible studies during her time in leadership and has a genuine heart for campus ministry. At Victory Church, she plays the synth, organ, and piano for the church. Most notably, she stepped up for Camille when she was on maternity leave and helped play the main keys for service on many occasions. She has also co-hosted a small group for hyphen-age girls, which I heard was really successful. I wasn't invited, but fine. Personally, she has a blog filled with apostolic content such as devotion and Bible studies called Grace-Filled Gaps. Go check it out. I'm sure she'd love the hits. She's a great friend and has a sincere heart for Jesus and his kingdom. Congratulations on graduating, Vernisha. What an amazing accomplishment. I was specifically told I was not allowed to read the notes for the third graduate, so...
Thanks. That's okay, I'll give you a handshake, hearty handshake. I don't know about y'all, but I was a little bit nervous when he was talking, that's fine. So before I get into talking about Ted, I just want to say that we're so grateful for James Guy and Vernisha. We are so excited for you guys. Y'all's friendships have blessed me more than you'll know. So we're going to miss you, but stay in touch. So I'm up here to talk about our final graduate, Ted, if that was not made clear. He will be graduating in August with a PhD in psychology from Texas A&M University. No, he cannot read your mind, but I'm sure he'd be happy to look at it under an MRI. His main research focuses on the cerebellum's role in executive function. And if you don't know what that means, don't worry, neither do I, and I read all of his papers. So while working towards his PhD these last 5 years, he's been involved in the following. The CMI chapter on campus with SALT, he was a member of SALT all 5 years. He was a secretary during his 3rd year. He taught lots and lots and lots of Bible studies and has helped advise for the past 2 years. At Victory Church, he's also been involved. He currently plays the bass. Although he did want to play the drums, he was told by a certain someone, Caleb Coppinger, that there was a need for a bassist. And so if you could not tell, he taught himself. That's because it's, So he also taught Sunday school for 3 years. He did 1 year with the 3rd and 4th grade class, and then 2 years with the 4-year-old class. He helped with Vacation Bible School for 3 years also, and was the main character twice. Sorry to burst any bubbles, he was Dr. Albert and Crash. Currently, he is the hyphen director, and he has been so for 1.5 years. He has led and co-led different small groups, and he volunteers wherever he can. He's helped during church work days, he's helped people move, and he even helped rescue people from a flood in Houston, Jimmy and Janie, just to name a few. But if you know Ted, you know he's faithful, humble most of the time, and a hard worker. Most of all, though, is that he loves God and serves God with everything that he has. Congratulations, Ted. We're excited for you.
Thank you. Okay, so I did get permission from Pastor to do this. So we do want to pray for our college graduates. So as much as I'm sure you're not looking forward to this, Vernisha and James Guy, if you don't mind coming to the front, we are going to have some of the ministers that I didn't ask beforehand, but will now ask to do so. So if Pastor, Jimmy, who else is here? Johnny, anybody else who wants to come up? I don't know if Ethan can come up. He's working the cameras. But we do want to pray. This is a wild transition. This is a transition in a wild world. There's a lot of things that I'm sure they're going to face that we're not even aware of yet. And I hope that we can, pray and kind of not only encourage their future growth, but also protection, guidance, wisdom, and maybe prevent